Good afternoon and welcome to the Sam Lacrosse Show. Happy Monday to everybody. Well, if we've learned anything over the past decade, a very dubious proposition, but we'll go with it, it would be the following. It is unequivocally wrong to discriminate against people based on things they can't control. You cannot tell people they either can or cannot do something because of whether they have a certain amount of melanin in their skin or they're born with certain chromosomes. It's anti-American and anti-Christian and should be rejected. And thankfully, it is being rejected, at least in some ways. The main movement in America that defined this, wokeism, is slowly but surely getting cut down in its current form. DEI centers are being shuttered left and right. Corporations are being brought to heel. Transgender hormones and surgeries for children are now so taboo that it has gained steam with over 80% of the political electorate to ban them. These are tremendous victories, and we should celebrate them as such. But we still have a long way to go. Anti-white and anti-Asian racism still runs rampant in college admissions departments and corporate boardrooms. Even with all the legitimate criticism of the Israeli government that has been raised in the past year, there is still a way too high number of people, particularly young men, expressing actual anti-Semitism via blood-based guilt and collective guilt towards Jewish people. The current governor of New York has said openly that he wants to tax white people more because of their skin color. These are issues that we must tackle before they spiral, as they have done in the past decade, into destruction. However, what is not wrong, and a lesson that many Americans, still have left to learn, is that judging the culture of demographics is different than judging people based on those demographics themselves. The latter is an assessment based on immutable characteristics, which is insufficient for judging the character, morality, and quality of a person. The former is an assessment based on decision-making, which is sufficient for judging the character, morality, and quality of a person. In my years of analyzing and studying various types of cultures, this is the make-or-break criteria that decides their success or failure. The English poet John Milton is perhaps the best explanation of this on record. Quote, "Luck is the residue of design." How true. Do some people occasionally catch a break that catalyzes their career, expands their income by several degrees, or lands them a date with a girl way out of their league? Absolutely, and we should account for that. But that said, it is not only luck that allows for these quote-unquote breaks to happen. When people say quote-unquote, "I can't catch a break," as Joe Rogan once stated in one of his most famous clips, what they really mean is, quote, "I should be treated differently for no reason at all. My choices don't matter. My decisions mean nothing." But this is untrue. When a person receives a phenomenal new job offer, it's more than likely true that the person toiled for years, honing and perfecting their craft, meticulously grinding away for an opportunity to land that offer. When a person hits it big on a new investment, it's more than likely true that the person had to toil very hard for that capital, invest incorrectly several times, and still have the guts to risk again. When a man lands a date with a woman way out of his league, it's more than likely that man was in his Bible every day, working hard in the gym, finding his way to financial stability, and improving his social skills. These people didn't quote-unquote catch a break. They simply were prepared enough so that when that break showed up, which it inevitably and always does, they could capitalize. And the exact same thing is true for cultures. Are there factors that are inherent to the nation of Somalia, for example, that could make it harder to succeed than the nation of the United Arab Emirates or Dubai? Are there reasons why El Salvador is undoubtedly a better place to live right now than Venezuela? Is there a purpose behind generations of immigrants moving to America and away from every other nation on earth? Of course there are. Some areas have different geographies, ethnic mixes, and things that are features of that nation that make it harder for some nations to succeed than others. Ask Rwanda in the 1990s or Nigeria right now, for example. But the overwhelming answer as to why places like Somalia and Venezuela can never seemingly get things right, and why Dubai and El Salvador have thrived, is the decisions they have chosen to make. Political instability is a choice. Economic systems are a choice. Religious emphasis and freedom is a choice. Hard choices, no doubt about it. But with proper discernment, leadership, and wisdom, they can be made. This is not just a true statement for the cultures of nations. This is a truism for all cultures. For example, one of my best friends when I moved to Austin was a first-generation Cuban American from Miami, Florida. During a conversation at work one day, I was stunned to hear that he had experienced immense amounts of racism, but not from Americans or white people. Rather, he had experienced the most racism by far from other Hispanic people, Colombians, Mexicans, Venezuelans, etc. And I was stunned to hear this as a white person. But Hispanic people, who obviously have more skin in the game of being Hispanic than I do, were not at all. In addition, a great number of my friends are first-generation Nigerian. Over the years, I've noticed something about almost every single one of them. They do not identify as quote-unquote African-American or quote-unquote black. They refer to themselves as quote-unquote Nigerian or quote-unquote Nigerian-American. When I ask why this is, their answer, like my Cuban friends, struck me. They don't identify as African-American or black. Their culture is too different. They would like to keep their own. Now, is this because my Cuban and Nigerian friends are racist against other African or Hispanic nations and peoples? Of course not. My friends are not racist people, because hardly anyone, newsflash, is a racist person. The reason they say these things are simple. For cultural purposes. They believe the actions, choices, and decisions of their culture are superior to those of other cultures who look similar, but achieve far different results because of their actions, choices, and decisions. They're making a proper judgment call, one based on things people can control versus on what they can't control. This is a hard truth to swallow, but that doesn't change the fact that it is indeed true. It is not racist to say that young black men commit more crimes in America than any other demographic we have on record. It is not anti-white racism to say that middle-aged white men are lowering the life expectancy of America by killing themselves in greater quantities. In a more sensitive example, Candace Owens was egged on by the American right, ironically by people like Mark Levin, for years to take every possible shot at black Americans that she could. And she did. But as soon as she turned her focus towards Jewish Americans and Israel, that same logic never applied, particularly for people like Mark Levin. We can play this game of cultural Russian roulette all day long, and in some cases we should, particularly when there are issues that we need to hash out, particularly where there are uncomfortable issues that we need to hash out. But interestingly enough, I don't believe that, as hard as it may believe, we've had the hardest one of these cultural demographic discussions as of yet. The hardest cultural demographic discussion America needs to have has nothing to do, actually, with black, Jewish, or white Americans. Rather, it has everything to do with a group that every one of those groups, and every other group I haven't named, has not touched with a 10-foot pole. White women. American white women have a problem. That problem? Many problems. The issues and problems facing black Americans, Jewish Americans, and white American men have no comparison to what is going on with young white women today. Their problems are immense, their futures are bleak, and their current trajectory is tragic. Now, I should preface this with what I prefaced our earlier discussions with. This is by no means a shot at white women because they have white skin and a second X chromosome. That's just as racist and sexist as it would be in any other scenario. But the reason why it's not the same reason as it is for all the other groups mentioned are the choices that this group has made. All of the issues that American white women face is a result of choices they and the broader culture that enables them have made. As the book of Hosea says, quote, "When you sow the wind, you reap the whirlwind." So then the logical next question becomes, what is that whirlwind exactly? What does it constitute? What does it look like? The person who put it in the best terms I've heard, unsurprisingly, is Jordan Peterson. In one of his last big-time interviews before he got sick, Dr. Peterson, in a conversation with Megyn Kelly, said something that has been stuck in my conscience ever since. Quote, "Young women today are where young men were 10 years ago." And having examined just where young men were 10 years ago, this sentence made my stomach drop. Young men were deemed a lost cause 10 years ago, hopeless, addicted, toxic. Just keep feeding them crypto trading platforms and DoorDash, and maybe they'll blow their head off with their dad's 22, or just end up ODing on fentanyl. Better that than actually listening to them. Better that than actually dealing with their problems and helping them with their problems. However, due to a miracle that can only be described as done by the grace of God, young men are starting to turn a corner. Many of them still do the things mentioned, like trade meme coins or on crypto for quote-unquote work, or blow all their money on DoorDash with Klarna. But many young men today are some of the most impressive I've ever met. They go to church. They're getting married. They're starting companies. They're putting others before themselves and submitting themselves to God. These are, thankfully for me, the vast majority of my friends. They are great men, and the world will reap the benefits of them and having them and helping them for generations. So how did this happen? Through a ton of fortitude, resistance, and strength. Through an ecosystem of positive male role models, mostly through podcasts and YouTube channels that just had the nerve to say that men were not worthless. through men having enough of getting kicked in the face by people who had the guts and had the guts, who hated their guts rather, and then had the guts to do something about it. We are not close to where we want to be, as evidenced by the problematic ideologies of men such as Andrew Tate and Nick Fuentes. But to say that we're not better than we were, and dramatically so, is a complete and utter lie. The same cannot be said, however, for young women. Young women are the most likely generation on record to be anxious or depressed clinically. They're more doped up on anti-anxiety meds and SSRIs than any other demographic in history. They are the most atheistic and liberal group of demographic women that we've ever seen come through our ranks. And most stunningly of all, a recent poll showed two remarkable things. First, that more men than women want to have and start a family. And second, that not only do more men want to have and start families, but for men, it is the thing they want the most. While for women, it's hanging around somewhere in the middle. Probably next to traveling and affirming another young white woman's recent trip to Bali by commenting Yas Queen on her post-trip Instagram post. These are alarming findings and numbers. So for all of us who should want to help young white women, which should be everybody, by the way, including me, we should ask the following. Why has this happened? Why are they alarmingly anxious and depressed? Why have they turned anti-child, anti-family, and anti-God? Why are they more liberal than ever before? Why are young white women in all areas that matter failing, just as young men were doing 10 years ago? In my estimation, there are three factors to this equation, and the first is the following. There have been no more coddled, entitled, and spoiled group of people than American white women. I've long said that the most harmful phrase ever uttered by American parents is, quote, "You're perfect just the way you are." It falsely convinces you that you can do no wrong, that there is no need for self-awareness, that you can just coast without having to prove yourself worthy of what you want. There is no group that has been told how wonderful they are more than American white women. They're fetishized in every hip-hop and rap music video. There is no disparagement of their social lives, unlike the quote-unquote incels and quote-unquote toxic environments that young men apparently inhabit. And I've not met a single one, by the way. Every urban evangelical church has made them their congregation's sacred cow. As Bill Burr once ironically stated in one of his Saturday Night Live monologues, they have somehow slipped their Gucci-booted feet inside of the realm of the woke movement, and not only that, they've taken the pole position. It's astounding when you think about it. But now the crows are coming home to roost. This coddling and entitlement of white women has proverbially, of course, come back around to slap them straight across the face. They clearly have not handled life outside of their bubbles well, at all. When you have to dope yourself up on meds just to simply get out of bed every morning, that's not a good sign. Neither is the fact that you view it as some kind of a hindrance to your self-actualization or something to get married and reproduce. They're bent towards liberalism is why everyone who bends towards liberalism does so. They would prefer to be given rather than to earn. Young white women are floundering, just as young men once were. Which leads to my second factor as to why young white women are floundering. In my view, one of the only things that has led to the great revival of masculinity in America within young men was a strong ecosystem of emergent role models in the culture. Perfect role models? No. But at least some role models, many of whom are excellent men, unquestionably. Names like Jocko Willink, David Goggins, Tucker Carlson, Jason Wilson, and yes, even Andrew Tate and Nick Fuentes to some degree come to mind. This has not been the case for young women, to put it mildly. Ask yourself this question. Who's the Jordan Peterson for women today? The Michael Jordan, the Tiger Woods, the Ben Shapiro, the Mark Driscoll. Hint, there are none. Young white women have no one to look up to at all. Every time a woman that could have filled the void is tried, think Caitlin Clark or Erica Kirk, for example, they've been shredded and made an example of, torn down by the very women who claim to love, quote-unquote, championing other women. And who are these women doing the shredding? And this perhaps is the scariest part. The word Karen has been tossed around very loosely over the past couple of years. But it's not without reason, because those quote-unquote Karens, the narcissistic hags that currently dominate the internet and are funneling all of this toxic femininity into our young women, are breeding other women to be Karens. These women, these Karen types, mostly deeply unfulfilled, unhappy women on too many anti-anxiety meds, are the greatest indictment of our culture's enablement of the destruction of American white women. The elevation of everything that destroys women, self-obsession, virality, excesses of physical traits, has effectively disenfranchised much of what could otherwise be a very promising generation of women, and in some cases is. But yet, due to the coddling of that generation and the emboldenment of Karen culture due to bad female leadership and role modeling, that has not taken place. Which leads me to the final factor in this equation as to why young white women are falling off a cliff. A disaffection from modern young men towards them. The saying, quote, "I don't need a man," has been popularized in recent years, particularly in the peak of the shameless, quote unquote, toxic masculinity era. When men were viewed as the most disposable, that saying became ever more popular among young women, particularly given their coddling and entitled nature and emboldening of that coddled and entitled nature by our Karen class. But the whole statement on its face isn't true. Women do need a man, just as, by the way, men do need women. It's not just a political or social principle. It's a spiritual principle. God made Adam to create and cultivate. He created Eve as Adam's helper. He created both of them to become one flesh, to be fruitful and multiply throughout the earth. To say that most men can somehow be fulfilled without women, or that most women can somehow be fulfilled without men, is an asinine statement. But yet, this is what American white women have been told. And what's resulted from this? Well, what would happen if someone told you, as unfortunately many of you have more than likely experienced, that they didn't need or want you, that they could get along just fine without your help, they were unessential to their way of living, so much so that you're not just someone who couldn't help them live a fulfilled life, but you're a hindrance to that fulfilled life. You'd probably, and rightly, say screw them. And this is the exact posture of a concerning amount of young men toward our floundering demographic of young white women, and the third reason as to why this is happening. The way I've described this is harsh and stark, but accurate and truthful. The reason why a large percentage of young men are increasingly turned off towards young white women is that on the outside, women have never been more beautiful. Beauty influencers, Instagram filters, and different cosmetic enhancers have made sure of that. But on the inside, young American white women have never been more spiritually ugly in the eyes of men. They have become so grotesquely unappealing to the vast majority of young men that young men have decided, due to this cultural rot that has festered for years inside of this demographic, that they want no part of it. They're looking elsewhere to find this rising demographic of what young men really want. Feminine, spiritually grounded, submissive, and traditional women who can help them achieve their purpose in life. They see the end destination of the trajectory of young American white women and are running as far away from it as they possibly can, and as fast as they can. And as proof of this, notice throughout this conversation that I've used quote-unquote white as the descriptor for these women. It's not that young men are no longer pursuing women, because that's not true at all. It's that they're no longer pursuing a certain type of woman. Young white women, to be specific. The number of friends that I have who are pursuing women of other non-white races is overwhelmingly high. And the reason is not because of race at all. Because again, most people and my friends are not racist, even against white women. It is, again, a commentary of the toxic culture that young white women have been stewing in. This is why the passport bros, men who go overseas to find women to date, are a thing. This is why the number of interracial relationships and marriages are skyrocketing among young people, and particularly among one demographic: young white men with young non-white women. It is not a comment on race. It is a comment on culture, ones that are attractive and complementarian versus unattractive and independent. If this continues, if Karen culture keeps consuming young white women as a whole, they will continue to spiral. The revolution is being televised. It's only a matter of if we choose to see it or not. And I would recommend, due to, again, me not wanting an entire demographic of young Americans to continue nosediving off a cliff, to do so, no matter how ugly it is. We must begin the stages of a counter-revolution to undo this mess we're currently in. The best way to start a revolution is through tough conversations. And I would urge us to start having them, and start having them now. Okay, I had to get that off my chest. Hope everyone had a happy Thanksgiving, by the way. I had a wonderful Thanksgiving. I record on Wednesdays, so I will have a Thanksgiving tomorrow. I think I'm going to have a wonderful Thanksgiving, so I hope everyone had a happy Thanksgiving. Okay, so this is going to be a conversation about culture. This is not a woman-bashing podcast. This is a Sam being honest about women podcast. I try not to do these too often, but I think that this conversation is very, very important. I've talked to a lot of people about this, younger people, older people, men, women, etc. And this culture of young white women The culture, not young white women themselves, is what is turning them off to most men. I think the best example is the church that I go to, and I love the church that I go to. I am around a lot of young white women, and they're mostly very attractive. I have no problem saying that. However, what I've noticed with a lot of them is when you breach that outside facade, when you actually are able to, and this is not just me saying that, I've talked to a lot, I lead in the men's ministry at my church, and I have these conversations all the time with various guys in different scenarios. When you breach that facade of the material outside beauty, you realize that behind a lot of these women, specifically, and again, young, white, corporate, professional women, the future Karens that are getting bred inside of our culture, you realize that there is a lack of depth there. There's like a hollowness there. And I think particularly from a Christian lens, what I have noticed, and what a lot of my friends who are single men have noticed, is that there is a lack of spiritual maturity there as well. And for this upcoming generation of young men, myself included, but a lot of young men, this is incredibly off-putting to men, this posture towards that young white women have adopted. And is it applicable in other demographics and black women and Hispanic women? It is, but not nearly to a degree as young white women are. Again, it's a cultural issue. It is not a race issue. It's not a race issue. And so it's just, I've noticed it too much. The mask is now off if we want to see that it's off. And I think that this is a commonality that is going to have drastic ramifications for our culture if we don't start talking about it. And so, because this affects marriage, this affects family formation, this affects cultural cohesion, this affects the relationship generally between the sexes. We're seeing it diverge on political lines and religious lines and a bunch of other things. And this is going to be a major issue if we don't address this and come to some kind of a social contract and collective understanding as to why this is actually happening. And the reason why I made a reference to spiritual ugliness earlier on, and I think that was, some people might say like, oh my gosh, you're woman bashing, you're harsh. Maybe. But also, I think that I'm right. I think that I'm right. And I think the evidence says that. The stats about interracial relationships, the stats about young men not being attractive to young white women. I know Nick Fuentes got a lot of this wrong when he talked to Tucker, but he talked about this too. And I can tell you that's the way a lot of young men feel. They feel exactly like, and I won't take Nick Fuentes in this specific example. I don't think he gets out of the house much. But I'll take Nick Fuentes' followers, for example, the Groyper people. They think the exact same thing, a spiritual ugliness about many young white women today. And I think that is a widely held, I don't think I know, that is a widely held belief across demographics and across many things about overall senses of where we are at as a culture, for example. And I believe that it comes down to essentially 3 reasons why this is happening, why this spiritual ugliness is manifesting. And reason 1 is a lack of shared intention and a lack of shared vision that men and women do not have. And that marriage statistic that I said earlier on, that now for men, marriage and family is the number 1 priority they want to have for young men right now. They want to get married and they want to start a family. And for young women, it's in the middle or at the bottom for many of them. That's an average, by the way. So if the average is number 1, a vast majority of men think it's number 1, or else it'd be number 2 or number 3. And an average of like in the middle, I think there were 13 priorities in that specific poll, means a lot of women, some women are above, but some women are way down here. And the average is in the middle, which tells you all that you need to know about where those priorities land. And, it tells you all you need to know about the priorities of these 2 demographics between young men, young white women. Because when you cannot even get to the same endpoint of where you want to go, like let's forget the means for a second. Let's talk about the ends. So when you are crafting the vision for your life and you're saying, I want to get to a certain point, then you can go back and get the means beforehand and see where those means are going to take you. And if your endpoints aren't the same, your means to get to those ends are going to look totally different. And one of the means of your life is the dating process. It is the relation process between the sexes. And so when the end point of where you want to go is so vastly different, and the priorities of what you want to do in your life are so vastly different across the sexes, a relationship, whether that's romantic or whether that's a friendship or whether that's platonic. It's not possible between two people. And God forbid you try to have intimacy with that person. Like if you even are just striking up a conversation and you want to get to know someone deeper and you say, hey, what are you working on? What are your goals right now? What are you trying to do in your life? And they say, well, I'm doing the complete opposite of you. And everything in my life is aimed at that complete opposite end that you want to get to. There is no possibility for a productive conversation between that person and the other person. It's why our political system is so messed up, is because we have gotten the visions for the trajectory, of America are so different between the left and the right and this weird middle thing that's kind of emerging right now. It's that we just we cannot see the forest through the trees anymore. And the biggest thing that is causing this unattractiveness this perceived unattractiveness of young white women towards men of all races, by the way, is the lack of intention about where you want to go in your life. Or it's not the lack of intention. I think there is intention there. Maybe not, that might not be the best word, but it is the lack of the defined point at the end not being the same, of a shared intention and shared vision. That's what I want to say, a shared intention and shared vision. Because if men and women, which they do right now, the data proves this, go look it up. If men and women do not want to get married and have kids at the same rate, at the same priority and the intensity level of getting there, that is going to cause a massive rift. And it is defining a generation of young people. I'm living in it. I can tell you that is 100% true. 100% true. It is defining a generation. It is defining a movement of both young men and of young women, particularly in the dating realm, but in other realms as well. And the second reason why men are viewing young white women as unattractive and spiritually ugly is that they don't feel important in conversations with them. I pick up on this all the time with guys that I talk to. Because men and women fundamentally do not understand each other. That's a reason why relationships are so cool and why marriage is so cool. It forces you to grow. It forces you to develop that side of yourself and stretch yourself and make yourself uncomfortable to help the other person and serve the other person and everything like that. For all the women out there, here's some free game about dating and relationships, marriage, whatever you want to call it. I'm single, by the way, but I think this is a universal concept. If you want intimacy, not even sexual intimacy, but if you want to make your man, your husband, your boyfriend, your fiance feel value or feel like the man, feel important, make them feel valued and make them feel important. Empower them, lift them up, encourage them, say you got this. I believe in you. I'm going to get behind you. Lead the charge. All men want to feel that way. All men want to feel useful. All men want to feel powerful. All men want to feel capable. All men want to feel competent about where they're going in their life. And to be quite frank, the way that young white women, the way this Karen culture breeding ground makes them feel is the opposite of that. It does not make them feel valued. It does not make them feel important. In fact, it puts them subservient to women. That's how most men in this scenario feel when talking to this demographic of people. Men want to provide. Men want to contribute. But with this kind of like independent, boss babe, coddled demo of women who do not want to play that role via traditional values, so that men can then build back into women in a traditional way by making them feel safe, making them feel comfortable, allowing them to be feminine, not to be in their masculine mindset the entire time of being what a man is. I got to charge the hill, do whatever. That's not natural for women. Women should not, in my estimation, this is a Christian worldview, be in that mentality all the time. They should be feminine most of the time, shocker, but that's the way it should be. Men should be masculine, women should be feminine. Cancel me all you want. I don't care. I don't even know if that still happens anymore, but whatever. So when women get out of that role of serving men in this way, in a relationship or in a dating environment or in a marriage, when they kind of just belittle them and nag them and put them down and say, like strong women, like, yeah, whatever, DEI, whatever you want to call it, gender role, gender equality, all that kind of stuff. it is making the rising generation of young men very unattracted to that demographic of women because they're not getting what they want. And a relationship is not getting what you want all the time, but there needs to be incentive to get into a relationship from both parties, from men and for women. And it's making men unattracted to that demographic of women because it's not in their cultural nature to do that as it currently sits. It's just not. And they're seeing that and they're like, listen, I don't, like, I'll date whoever, I just don't want to date that. And a lot of guys that I know, they're pretty reasonable about their standards. Like, they're not going to disqualify, a woman because she has blonde hair versus brunette hair, like whatever. Like, that's not a thing. But it's just on the fundamental things of making a man feel like a man in a certain scenario. Young white women do not do that from what I've seen and what I've experienced and what I've talked to other men about. They just don't do that for the most part. Generalizations here, but that's the most part of what I have seen, what we have seen, etc. Which leads to the third reason why young men are finding young white women unattractive is a lack of shared values. There's a bunch of data on this now, especially we're almost a year, 13 months past the election at this point. But the rising, overwhelming evidence, rising tide of conservative young men versus liberal young women. And what I think is really coming out of this, I think we're starting to experience this now, is that it's turning dating into a hyper-competitive, like, boxing match that obviously leads to massive levels of unhealthiness because anytime any relationship is a competition, it ceases to be a relationship. You're not relating anymore. Newsflash, that's what the word means. A relationship is about relating to another person. And when you're in competition with that person, that is not a relationship. It's not. You cannot form a home and a family unit with someone whose values diametrically oppose yours. You can't. And all this talk about like, well, interfaith relationships, interpolitical relationships, bad idea. Bad idea. You are inviting controversy into your marriage. Now, if you want to disagree about the marginal tax rate, if you have varying different views on like predestination or like whatever it's going to be, like that's fine. But if you are a Christian and you go on a date with a Muslim girl, or you are a Muslim man and you go on a date with a Christian girl, you should not marry that person. Mark Driscoll says this all the time. You'll probably make that other person a worse Muslim and the other person a worse Christian if you do that. You're not serving that person in that way. And the same is true with politics. And I'm fine with disagreements on the margins, but it is a values question. It is not about making you happy. It's not about the other person being happy. It is a values question because values lead to happiness. Happiness does not necessarily lead to values. 1 + 1 doesn't always equal 2 in that scenario. It all depends on what the math is. So for young men, they're going elsewhere for getting those needs met, those shared values met. And it's really going in two ways. The nihilistic way are, porn and video games. So they soup themselves up to AI porn, they pay for subscriptions, they go on OnlyFans and blow all their money or whatever it's going to be. And then video games, they go and they live some kind of adventure in some kind of virtual reality world or whatever games people play nowadays. Well, the other way, the emerging category of young men, the other way that they are dealing with this is they're going to other demographics of women, which is wonderful, by the way. I'm not against interracial marriage at all. I would say a majority of my friends are in interracial marriages or in interracial relationships, a majority of them. And it's working, by the way. Most of them are very happy, and I'm very happy for them. But young white women are getting left out in the cold, and it's not a race thing, it's not anything else thing. It is a cultural thing that young men are noticing. And to be honest, good for them for acting on it. Good for them for acting on it, because this Karen culture that is setting down into young white women it's not good for anybody. And it's not good for them. It's not good for men. And I'm glad that men are acting on it and getting what they need out of women. And it's not a transactional relationship, obviously, but it needs to be something there for them. And I'm finally glad that men are sticking up for themselves and actually getting that for themselves. And I think this decision-making criteria that young men are having towards young women is starting to play itself out. Like we're starting to see the fruit of this tree that was planted with Karen culture. We're starting to see it really kind of sprout in this way. And the proof of this that I'm referencing is the natural end state of women who embody Karen culture. And so men, young men, all men, but young men in particular who are in this market, due to social media, are looking now and have a full vantage point of what these women become, regardless of political affiliation, by the way. This is not even a right or left issue. This is a spiritual gender issue. And so they're seeing the manifestation of this coddled, entitled, emboldened mindset of like the feminist boss babe movement, whatever. And they're wanting no part of it. I'll just put it mildly. They're not wanting any part of it. They're not going to touch it with a 10-foot pole. And, they're seeing this kind of resentful post-prime, like whatever you want to call it, like unhappy nature of the end state of women. And it's really, really starting to get ramped up online. And they're saying, no thanks. I don't want any of it, because that resentment always builds on itself. Fear always builds on itself. Emotions always beget more emotion. And there was this hilarious clip, and Tucker's talked about it a couple times, but Tucker said, I think a couple months ago, and he said it again since, and I think it's funny, but it's also, I think, proving more and more to be accurate, to be honest with you. But women that are in positions of higher authority and power are way more violent, way more aggressive, way more control. You know where he said this? And he said this in Kamala Harris's DNC speech where she accepted the nomination for president, where she's ranting about how she's going to blow up all the Middle East again. And, John Bolton wrote her speech and she's like, I'm going to kill all these people and rah and yeah, and all this kind of stuff. And so he's like, that's scary if she gets in that. Hillary Clinton was the exact same way, by the way. Nikki Haley would have been the exact same way, by the way. They would have all, like the Middle East would be a parking lot if those women had gotten into it. I'm fully convinced about that. They're far more violent, aggressive, controlling, which has, and you think about like historical examples of this, like Mao Zedong's wife was just as, if not more brutal of a communist than Mao Zedong himself, easily. And again, this is not an absolute. I'm not trying to be sexist here. But when you look at we can only see what we can see. And when you look at the examples that are coming out of this, that are resulting of this rot of Karen culture, there's a lot of fruit on that tree. I'll just put it that way. There is a lot of fruit on that tree with the way that this is ending up. And it's even happening, by the way. I want to be fair. I talked about Nikki Haley earlier on, but there was but this is happening on the right too. So it's not just young conservative women thinking like, oh my gosh, I'm going to get out of here. No. It's happening on both sides of the political aisle as well, which makes it even more frustrating because it's kind of a cell phone of the whole being a conservative thing is falling into the Karen mindset, which is kind of a leftist concept in general. And so Katie Miller, I thought this was a really funny example. I wanted to bring this up. Katie Miller, who literally was, we talked about this a couple months ago, was just talking with Pam Bondi after the Charlie Kirk assassination about throwing people into jail, like they're doing in Britain, by the way, for saying mean things to people about Charlie Kirk. Katie Miller had Pam Bondi, the chief law enforcement official in the United States, onto her podcast and said, I think we should throw people in jail for saying mean things about Charlie Kirk. And should I think people should say mean things about Charlie Kirk? No. And say that, I'm glad he died or I wish bad things in his family. Like those people are disgusting, obviously, and immoral, obviously. But to throw them in jail for that is insane. The toxic femininity of, I care so much about people that I'm going to crush every single person that is in the opposite of the person that I'm advocating for. Off the rails, like off the chisane we're talking about there. And so she had this clip where she went on Piers Morgan's show a couple of weeks ago. And she was on with Cenk Uygur, who runs the Young Turks, and he's on Piers' show all the time. And I don't know much about Cenk Uygur. I don't even know what ethnicity he is. I believe he's Middle Eastern. but I'm not sure. So apologies to Cenk if he ever sees this, I guess. But, so he's clearly a non-white guy. So he's clearly a different ethnicity. He's not non-white. And so he gets on with Katie Miller and the whole panel that Piers Morgan does in his show. And Cenk Uygur is a fully naturalized American citizen from what I can tell. He might be an immigrant, I don't know, but I think he's American. I think he's born in America. And so she gets on there and threatens to deport Cenk Uygur on the show. And by the way, her husband, Stephen Miller, is the one who is running the border policy along with Tom Homan. And so she gets up there and saying, I'm going to deport you and we'll send you back to your home country. And Cenk is like, honey, I was born in America. I was born in America. And so this is the unhinged behavior. This is the natural insight of this coddled, entitled mindset that young white women will have if they go and they do not stop it. This is the behavior. This is the natural end state manifestation of the unhinged, wild behavior that can only result from a feminist mindset about being a boss babe, you go girl, like Yas Queen, all this kind of stuff. This is where it ends. This is where it ends. And people can slam me all they want and say all these things, but this is the natural end state with anybody that's become coddled and entitled and whatever. I know a lot of people, one person very intimately in particular, that has been coddled for their entire life, and they are about this much away from complete self-destruction and complete radicalizing behavior, addiction, violence, etc. And we are encouraging this in an entire generation of young women. And I will be very clear. Again, this is not a women need to be put in their place argument. This is not a shut up and make me a sandwich argument. But it is a comment and an indictment about the roles that men and women play and what their incentives are to play them. So when you look at the Katie Millers of the world, the Nikki Haley's of the world, the Hillary Clintons of the world, the Kamala Harris's of the world, you look at who they're married to, and this goes back to men wanting to be championed by their wives, which I think is a natural thing for all men. I don't care how much of a supposed male feminist, which isn't even real, by the way, of a supposed male feminist or like wife guy you are. Doug Emhoff falls in this, obviously. Men hate being treated that way by women, and by their wives especially. Men do not want to be with a man-eater for their wife because it emasculates them, and it makes them look and feel weak and helpless. And if you want proof, look at what's happened to Barack Obama. Michelle Obama, seemingly every single week, goes on a podcast and trashes Barack Obama. Just lights him up every single day. Bill Clinton is a husk of himself. A husk. And some people say he's sick, so I don't want to assume anything there. But the Obamas especially, like Michelle Obama hates her husband. She hates Barack Obama. Hates him. Absolutely hates him. And Doug Emhoff is a prisoner to Kamala Harris. A prisoner to her. I mean, absolutely like on a leash with Kamala Harris. And he can say that I love women and I love that my wife was, tried to run for president and then flopped on her face. He hates it. And it showed, by the way, when that thing came out about him slapping that woman. I mean, it's like come on. Like what are we doing here? These men, because of their passivity, by the way, they're not blameless in this. These are passive men that let their wives steamroll them, and no self-respecting man will ever do that, ever. But their wives have been turned into monsters. And like they have been turned into monsters, and people are seeing this and they're like, "Oh my God, I do not want to end up like Barack and Michelle. I don't want to end up like that." They're wanting to, and young men are seeing this, and they're wanting to run as far away as possible from this type of scenario, as they should, by the way, as they should. And it shows how, it shows how ineffective Karen culture is. And again, this is not specifically designed to one race, one political affiliation, etc., even though it has certainly been inculcated in young white women in particular. But it is a mindset that has been set into women for years. For years. And it is now being activated, catalyzed by a lot of cultural phenomenon, by this wild, crazy feminism, by the transgender stuff, by a lot of other things. And the point of all of this, I have a thing that, I say often to either, people that I'm talking to or my friends or whatever, and I think it's true. We are all programmed by something. We all have a programming inside of our head. We have a way of seeing the world. We have a worldview that we look through. Steve Day says worldview is destiny. We are all programmed, which is true. We are all programmed by something. And young women now, particularly young white women now, are programmed by Karen culture, programmed by it. And until young women get a different set of programming installed, defined by a different set of role models doing the programming, women with institutional power and authority to put this information into the youth and to everybody else, they will continue to spiral, just as young men did, and just as a lot of young men are still doing now when listening to Andrew Tate or Nick Fuentes, for example. We are all programmed by something. And if that programming isn't right, then we're going to have some problems. And a lot of problems, I would argue. And they will continue to spiral if this happens. Young women will. And we should not be shocked by it, because it is, the natural end state of this, which is a class of upset, angry, resentful women that are breeding more angry, upset, and resentful women. And you can hate me all you want for thinking that way or for saying this out loud, but it's true. And we all know it's true if you're being honest with yourself. And I'm dreading even going here with this, because I despise this person. I don't like talking about this person, but the ultimate warning sign of this Karen culture, the blaring red flag, the warning sign, like stop, do not pass go, do not collect $200 person that we are seeing from this, is Jennifer Welch. So Jennifer Welch is quite possibly the scariest person I've ever seen in my entire life. More than by far, like any dictator, despot, United States swamp creature politician, serial killer in the world market today. She is horrifying. And I mean horrifying. Like Dick Cheney doesn't hold a candle to this lady. Like if you have not seen the things that Jennifer Welch says, if you haven't looked and seen like all the plastic surgery that has completely redone her face and all the, the skin that's about to crack like every time she smiles because of the Botox and stuff. Like if you have not seen this woman, first of all, praise God that you have not seen this woman, but she awful, just awful. And she is the classic example of the endpoint of Karen culture. Wine mom, liberal woman, who atheistic, most likely, I don't know, but probably atheistic, like spiritual practice, whatever. She prays to rocks or something. And she is the thing that we need to hold up and say, this is what we should not be doing. But we are doing it, but this is what we should not be doing. And she is quite possibly the scariest person I have ever seen in my life. I'm not even joking about this. So she is, for those who don't know about Jennifer Welch, she is the host of the I've Had It podcast. I've never listened to it. I never will listen to it. I've seen the clips. I don't want any more. I just saw the thing with Joy Reid talking about how, Erica Kirk is like having an affair with JD Vance or something. And that's, obviously obscene and ridiculous and whatever. But the I've Had It podcast, from what I have seen, the little research that I've dared myself to do, the only role of Jennifer Welch and that podcast and that medium and that type of woman in the culture, their only role, their only function is to drive hatred and vitriol towards anything that is good and traditional, religion, men, conservative values, etc. That is the sole role of someone like Jennifer Welch, to be a battering ram for this Godzilla of an ideology that we are smuggling towards our young women now. And you can tell this, by the way. I'm not just saying this just to say this. You can tell this by listening to what she goes viral for. So, for example, Charlie Kirk, who Jennifer Welch hates and has openly said that she despises Charlie Kirk and wishes that he got assassinated and everything like that, which is disgusting, obviously. But when Charlie Kirk was murdered, what went viral after Charlie Kirk got assassinated? I love Jesus. I think you should get married. It's like a lot of good things happen. And Charlie went viral for a lot of things when he was alive. But when he died, and a lot of the reels and the posts and everything retweeted, it was about like, I love Jesus and Christianity, and I think marriage is good, and I think that Trump is good. And things that are opinionated, but things that were overwhelmingly good things. And you can tell really by what someone in the culture goes viral for, what they truly believe. And some of it is fake, but the mass aggregate of it, everything regresses to the mean in abstract. And so the only thing that Jennifer Welch goes viral for, the only thing, are profanity-laced, hateful rants around issues that she has been brainwashed by the culture that she has been baked into turning into blunt instruments to beat people over the head with. And again, it tells you all that you need to know about what Jennifer Welch represents. A hatred towards everything that is the natural end state of Karen culture, which is the elevation and the idolatry of women. If I were to say what Karen culture is, it is the elevation and the idolatry of women above everything. We need to do everything to serve women, to have women be this and to have women be that. And am I perfectly okay with women being elevated for becoming a CEO of a company or doing something great, writing a book? Yes, of course. I'm a meritocrat. I should say that right off the bat. But putting anything on a pedestal, to put it on a pedestal, to put women on a pedestal, just be the same with men, by the way. That's what chauvinism is, by the way. There is a definition for that, or word for that, I should say. As with putting anything other than God, one of my favorite J. Cole lyrics ever, the only thing above me is God himself. Everything else is equated, at a human level, obviously. Results in one thing and one thing only: narcissism and self-obsession to such a degree where you lose your humanity. You become debased from who you are as a person. And you just become a battering ram for your ideas. It's a battering ram for ideas. Jennifer Welch is a construct. She's not a real person. She might be an AI for all I know. Who knows? But she is so, like I said, debased herself, separated herself from being an actual person. Like she's kind of like Nick Fuentes in a way. Like she's just a meme at this point. She's like a caricature, cartoon character of what something wants to be. And in terms of women in relationships, again, from a man's perspective, to all the women that might be listening to this is the last thing that men want. But since we have not been allowed in our culture, particularly as men, to critique women, feminism, liberalism, etc., Karen culture, the elevation of women, the idolatry of women, the sexual idolatry of women has resulted from that. Because when you can't critique something, that thing is going to end up becoming an idol. When you can't levy a criticism against something, that thing is untouchable. That thing will automatically corrupt itself and become a bastardization of what it is. And so in regards to someone like Jennifer Welch and people like her, because there are a lot of people like Jennifer Welch. Jennifer Welch is the most popular, the most unhinged, the most crazy of these people. Actually, I looked up her book the other day. She apparently wrote a book with her host, who has a weird nickname. I can't remember what it is right now, and Barack Obama endorsed it. So Barack Obama is now so cucked by Michelle or Big Mike, whoever you want to refer to him or her as at this point, that he is now endorsing the Karen culture that he apparently is, and he's, what. So it's alarming and it's sad, honestly, to see. But anyway, in regards to Jennifer Welch, on one hand, I never want to hear a word come out of her mouth again. She is a shut up and go make me a sandwich type person. And by the way, never come out of the kitchen ever again. She is a shut up and stop talking, mansplaining type of woman. I will totally mansplain Jennifer Welch every single day of the week. But on the other hand, there is a lot of incentive to as painful as it might be for someone like me, and for probably a lot of people like you if you know who Jennifer Welch is, there is a lot of incentive to keep her talking. Because just as with the Groyper conversation and other conversations, I think the right approach to take is the Matt Walsh approach. And the Matt Walsh approach, he said this on Rogan, he said this a couple other times, which I think is the accurate one. We need to allow the chief Karens in the culture, hyperbolically, obviously, to hang themselves to their own arguments, to make themselves so invalid, like the gender ideology conversation. This is the analogy Matt Walsh used. Just let them say what they want to say. Yeah, I want to cut the breasts off your daughter and turn her into a boy. What? Sorry. No. You're not allowed to do that. Nope. Sorry. And then fill their bad ideas with good ideas. So Jennifer Welch, I will say it again. I will shout it from the rooftop. She is one of the most horrible people in the world right now. She's awful. From every metric, she's awful. But she can be the antithesis of what we need to actually help young women move forward properly. And so as painful as it might be for someone like me, it might be worth it to just keep the woman talking and to keep her, the blabber on the same thing, whatever. And again, as painful as it might be, Jennifer Welch is an important cultural figure right now. And if we're doing it right, she would be a cautionary figure now and into the future for young women and for young men as well. So how do we fix this? And this is a deep problem. This is going to take a lot of effort, a lot of intentionality, a lot of work from a lot of people. But the way that you fix anything is to get better endpoints, to craft a better vision, as Jordan Peterson says, and goals to drive towards. And this is why role models matter so much. This is why everybody should have someone who is older than them that can speak life into them, and why if you're an older person, you should speak life into younger people, because you do make a lot of difference in that regard and in that realm as well. So this has been proven with young men. Young men are a good example of this. This has been proven with the rise of the podcast brosphere, among other things, because for a lot of the prior generation, in I would say 25 years in the past, male role models were bastardized. They were cut out. Sitcom dads weren't a thing anymore. They were all kind of stupid, oafish Peter Griffin, Homer Simpson types, or they were domineering, tyrannical, Walter White, Don Draper types. And so, but the installment of better role models is I think probably the biggest reason why young men have been able to right the ship. And I think if we're going to help young white women, we need to have the same approach in that demographic. The same must be true with young women. We need better role models for young women. And from what I've seen is there are three main characteristics that we need to have our leaders in the female space talk about, embody, and embolden inside of themselves and inside of others. And the first one is traditional and particularly biblical femininity. So the interesting thing about the men and women dynamics today, one of the interesting things of many, is that men have come to where women have traditionally been in terms of regards to masculinity, in terms of, I want to have a family, I want to have marriage, but women have moved away from that. So they it's ships in the night, like they missed each other. And so young men are trending this way, women are trending this, they're trending towards the more destructive path that young men were. Young men are trending to the more constructive path that women traditionally were. And so with the large percentages of young men who are going to church and are moving conservative, nothing is stopping this train at this point, unless something drastic happens, which I don't think it will. We need women who are championing those same values, not masculine values, but cultural values. Again, this is a conversation about culture, not gender, not race, not anything. We need women who are championing those same values to be at the forefront. We need women who are championing a traditional, a biblical form of femininity. This is not less than, but it's equated to but differentiated femininity. And again, like people have tried to shut the door in a lot of these women's faces, but I think there are women out there that can do this. And as men, and as I think with women as well, we need to be able to champion this as well. Women like Erica Kirk, Usha Vance, Allie Beth Stuckey, Riley Gaines, just to name a couple right off the bat. It is going to be hard, just as it was hard with the male podcast influence sphere to get this going and to make these women now be what Beyonce or Megan Thee Stallion or Jennifer Welch, God forbid, or whoever else is driving the conversation for women now. But that is what we need to be championing, a traditional, particularly biblical form of femininity that what we want women to embody if we, as men especially, want better women out there for our daughters, for the people that we date, etc. And the second thing that this new class of female role models, I believe, should emphasize is complementarianism. Women cannot be men. Men cannot be women. Sorry, not sorry. I'm not sorry, actually. Men are, and again, newsflash, it's going to blow your brains. Men are attracted to women who embody the feminine role. Men are attracted to feminine women. Shocker. Women are attracted to masculine men. Shocker. And again, this is not, for the millionth time, this is not shut up and make me a sandwich. But this is a woman liking being a woman and what being a woman allows me to do, what it naturally predetermines me to do. Not just biologically. Obviously, women can give birth. Men can't get pregnant. Shocker, again. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. And what this does, what this complementarianism does, Owen Strachan talks about this quite a bit. He identifies as a complementarian as well. I do as well. It allows for each person, the man and the woman, to rest in what they are naturally attuned to do and to have favor with the other person doing so. Like, oh my gosh, thank God you have this trait and I don't. That's what being a complement is. Like a steak sauce, and for God forbid you use steak sauce, but a steak sauce is meant to enhance the steak. It is not to be the sole nourishment of the meal. And by the way, don't use steak sauce. Use a different topping for your steak. Be a civilized person. But you get what I'm saying. Like ketchup on a cheeseburger. You eat the burger for the burger, not the ketchup. It is a complement to the other person, men and women. That's not meaning someone's the burger, someone's the ketchup, someone's the steak, someone's the steak sauce. It can be that way for a lot of different things and should be that way for a lot of different things. And so, and the third, I'm going to keep driving this home. The third thing that needs to be emphasized in this new class of female role models that we need to develop a better vision for the future is shared values and vision. And the marriage and family stats are beyond alarming, not only because of the non-continuation of our species and the birth gap, which is already wide enough as it is. We don't need to get any wider. But because it cuts off any shared vision and future between the sexes. So a good female role model for the current era of America must, and I mean must, champion marriage and family as the first priority for women, as it is with men, or everything else will fall flat because of a lack of it. If we do not get the shared vision fixed, the shared values fixed, this will never get fixed. None of the marriages, none of the families, none of the kids will matter if the vision and the values do not fit, which is a value-oriented and particularly a Christian-oriented way of seeing the world. That is the only way that this gets fixed. That's the only way that this works. And so women that want to come and lead other women and be a part of this to help fix this problem need to emphasize that. Or else everything goes away, nothing else will work. That is an absolute essential thing, and we cannot move forward if we don't have it. We need to have it. Because if we don't, without a vision, people perish. Without a shared vision, people will separate. And the men and women dynamics of our culture will never get fixed. Thank you all for watching. Again, I hope you had a lovely Thanksgiving. Own the day. Open your mind. I'll see you guys next week.